Lima Niazi, a 15-year-old Pashtun woman in Kabul, with her latest poem addressed to the Taliban. For a long time, Pashtun poetry has been a form of rebellion for Afghan women. It belies the notion that women are submissive or defeated. Landai are two-line folk poems that can be funny, raunchy, raging, or tragic, and have traditionally dealt with love and grief. The word Landai means short, poisonous snake in Pashto. The poems are collective. No single person writes a Landai. A woman repeats one, shares one. It is hers and not hers. Although men do recite them, almost all are cast in the voices of women. But writing poetry is dangerous for many Afghan women and girls. Love, its classical subject, in almost any form, is taboo. It threatens to be evidence of an illicit relationship. Landai belong to women, says Safia Siddiqui, a renowned Pashtun poet and former Afghan parliamentarian. In Afghanistan, poetry is the women's movement from the inside. Mirman Baheer is Afghanistan's largest women's literary society, and in Kabul has more than 100 members. These are drawn primarily from the Afghan elite, professors, parliamentarians, journalists and scholars. They travel on city buses to their Saturday meetings, their faces uncovered. But roughly 8 out of 10 women in Afghanistan live outside urban areas. In Khost, Paktia, Maidan, Wardak, Kunduz, Kandahar, Herat and Farah, the society's members number 300, where the situation for women is very different. Only 5 out of 100 graduate from high school, and most are married by the age of 16, with 3 out of 4 in forced marriages. So in rural areas, Mirman Baheer functions largely in secret. Many of the rural members have to use mobile phones to participate at meetings, calling whenever they can, often at great personal risk. They read their poems to the group by phone, and these are then transcribed line by line. To conceal poetry writing from their family, they rely on pen names. Traditionally, women writing poetry is seen as shameful and could mean they get beaten or even killed.
So when we were in search of the dead poet Rahila Muska, in search of her story and her family, in this rural area called Grishk, which is part of Helmand, we actually were able to find her parents, startlingly. And they, although they were not willing to say that she had killed herself, in fact they said that she was a good girl, and no good girls want to go to school or write poetry or anything like that. And in fact, she had been killed while trying to get warm after a bath. She'd lit herself on fire by mistake. Although they lied to us about the story, they were willing to take us to her grave. And so we went to her grave, which was extremely, extremely moving.
Zarmina, who committed suicide 2 years ago, described her life in Helmand province. She wrote of the dark cage of the village. Her poems pose questions. Why am I not in a world where people can feel what I'm feeling and hear my voice, she asked. In Islam, God loved the Prophet Muhammad. I am in a society where love is a crime. If we are Muslims, why are we enemies of love? Said Zarmina. Zarmina is the most recent of Afghanistan's poet-martyrs to the women of Mirman Baheer. She was a sacrifice to Afghan women, says Ogai Amail, poet and Mirman Baheer organizer. There are hundreds like her. But Landai often employ a wry and earthy humour to confront men and to rail against the bondage of forced marriage. An aging, ineffectual husband is frequently described as a little horror. Gollek, a 22-year-old woman in Gereshk, Helmand province, said she made up poems all the time as she cooked and cleaned the house. I know this is true, she confided with a giggle. My father married me to an old man when I was 15.